Welcome to Northeast Storytellers 2022 New Members Showcase. I'm Oni Lasana, and I joined Nest about 3 years ago. And if you're not a member, we hope you will join Nest, Northeast Storytellers, where you'll feel right at home in the land of storytelling. Our first storyteller is Mike Perry. He is nesting in Pennsylvania. Is that right, Mike?
That's true.
And Mike's broad and adventurous career experience has taken him from the circus to the Census Bureau, from major motion pictures to maintenance man. Mike has taught elementary school and performed as a corporate edutainer. These days, if he's not teaching storyteller, he is telling tales and sharing stories at fairs, festivals, libraries, and schools throughout the Pittsburgh tri-state area. You can find Mike Perry at Mike Perry Biz. So let's welcome Mike Perry. He's going to tell an original story called Ansel's Song. Mike?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I got tired listening to all those things I've done, but I'm glad this is one of them. It's very exciting to be here. Hey, I brought a story about a little friend of mine. And by the end of the story, you might be saying, I think I know him. You see, Ansel was part of a class and they'd been working hard, and their class was almost ready to graduate. Well, they'd been working hard as a unit because it's what they are. It's what they do. You see, they were ants. They'd grown stronger each day. They had learned to work together, and spring was coming, which meant it was time to march one by one. It's how it's done. They were ants. Spring came, and that's exactly what happened. They'd been trained beautifully to work together, to support the colony. Cut, cut, drag, drag, eat, and return to the colony. It was all for the greater good. They were ants. There were no other choices. The rules were simple. Failure was not an option. And if by chance the one in front of you should falter and fall, step over him kindly and proceed. And one in front of you should falter and fall, and you cannot step over him. Simply drag him to the side and proceed. And if by chance the one in front of you should falter and die, eat him kindly and proceed. They were ants. They were unstoppable. One day when they were on their way, the word came down from the front, stop, assume the defensive position. The word came down, and they were trained to do such things. One faced this way, one faced that way. Some formed a circle. They were a machine. Psst, psst. Up ahead, there was a sound. Psst, psst. It was foreign to Ansel. He could not identify it, but it was okay that day because word came down, it's just a lazy grasshopper. Go ahead, proceed. So they did. It was summer now, and well, that sound, psst, psst, Ansel started to hear it almost every day. sometimes just once. Then silence, and then psst, psst, maybe twice. It was interesting, but who could be bothered? Who could be bothered with such nonsense? They had work to do. They were ants. One day, they stopped because evidently it was in the way. Psst, 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 psst. Ansel took a moment to turn to the ant behind him and say, "Isn't that an interesting sound?" "Oh, don't let that nonsensical noise blow into your mind," said the ant, "but I'm told they're kind of tasty." Now, as the summer proceeded, Ansel looked forward to that sound, that chirping, that melodic noise. Psst, psst, psst. Almost every day he heard it, and it became part of his routine. Unknowingly, it had entered his mind until one day, up ahead, it landed right on top of him. He looked up, and there was this huge grasshopper. Oh, it was glorious. Green, what an unusual color. Look at those rear legs, they were giant, but he had three body parts, so like me, and 6 legs. We're practically related. He came to this conclusion, but could not understand in watching this grasshopper, how is it he travels alone? He flew off before Ansel could ask him, hey, but he flew away. All he did is make noise every day and eat for himself. Where is his colony? Ansel thought. And so it wasn't long before these questions, this song started to enter into his mind. Where is his colony? How can he survive on his own? How does he know what to do? And then he would shut these out because he did not have the tools to deal with questions. There were no questions. You're an ant. Move, do, tear, carry, bring it back to the colony, the greater good. But it was too late. You see, the questions had no answer, and that was frustrating. It was too late because what was really happening was this noise, this chirping was planting a seed. It was germinating something that he could not identify. It was curiosity. And it was not going to leave him alone. One day they stopped to get out of the rain. And as they did, the grasshopper landed somewhere up ahead. And sure enough, not a moment later, 2 ants went walking by carrying a large leg. And then as Ansel looked the other way, a wing went by on the back of one of his friends. Ansel missed it all because in that moment, something happened. You see, those raindrops were falling and they were hitting him and they were germinating that unknown thing that was inside him. That curiosity was germinating. And he no longer heard the sounds that he grew so accustomed to. So in his mind, he heard pss, 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 pss. And it played over and over. And what had been an annoyance now became some sort of comfort because that curiosity was germinating. That noise was germinating curiosity like the rain itself. And suddenly, was it electric? Was it magnetism? Something sparked within him, something unknown and glorious. In that moment, he knew. It all became clear. He turned around and said, music. Yes, music, expecting everyone to understand, but nobody understood. They were ants. And when he turned around, he stumbled, and the ant behind him walked over him kindly. And the ant behind him dragged him off to the side kindly. And they all went marching 2 by 2, for they were ants. That's what they do. Back in the colony, a new generation was being born. Back in the colony, these little neophytes were being trained from day one. More, better, better. Boom, 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 boom. Do it again, do it again. Boom, 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 boom. We all go marching 3 by 3. You are ants is what you see. Boom, 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 boom. But Ansel was not a part of that. You see, Ansel had stumbled. The music had entered his head. The thoughts had entered his heart. Music had become part of his soul. But the ants, they all went marching down into the ground to get out of the rain. Boom, 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 boom. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're quite
Oh, that
welcome.
was my favorite childhood song. Down to the earth, to the ground, boom, boom, boom. We all
Yeah.
grew up on that one, right? And your
Yeah.
visual was so strong. I felt like I was a little ant right there in the colony.
You know,
Very
I have to say, I never understood Aesop's version of that tale because let's face it, the grasshopper was being a grasshopper. It's what he is. That's his nature. So I never understood why he had to be punished, you know?
well. I
So
love your twist on the Aesop story. It's wonderful. I
thank you.
love it. Patricia Coffey says, great, wonderful. I loved hearing the ant story, Laura Sims. Yeah, your twist on it was really, really captivating. Now let
Thanks.
me go put out my ant bait anyway. Okay.
Hey, I do have to
I've
go.
had ant problems all summer. Okay.
Oh, I hope not.
Okay.
I hope not.
All
I
right.
have to go. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And I really look forward to seeing you very
What a
soon.
fun story. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks,
Be
everybody.
well. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Oh, well, we're going to travel to Patricia Coffey. We're going to from a small city in the big heart of Iowa. Patricia discovered and loved the beauty and rhythm of the language as a child when her father sang songs to her and her mother read poetry. She grew up in a large family, lived and learned family stories. Patricia taught language arts in junior high school. She learned survival stories. That's what high school will do to you. She worked in public schools, libraries, and learned people stories. That's what that'll do to you, too. Patricia explored puppetry, learned classic stories and original stories. She raised sons alone, learned learned stories and told and untold stories. Patricia became a grandmother and learned wonder stories all over again to the delight of her grandchildren. She also listened to storytellers and she's learning to tell her own. So let's break out our whole wheat biscuits and listen to Making Gravy by Patricia Coffey.
I was raised on meat and potatoes and gravy as a big city girl until I was 15. And then my dad decided his 7 kids would be better people if they lived out in the country and did some of that just plain hard farm work the way he had. And so he moved us out to the country on 40 acres. And you know, it took some getting used to. We moved from a 3-bedroom house to a 2-bedroom house. I'll let you think about what that meant. But there were 2 real difficult things to get used to in that move. One was the kitchen. If you took that big Formica table around which 9 people could sit for a meal, and you put it in the kitchen in the city house, if you needed something from the cupboard or the cabinet or the sink or the stove, or even the refrigerator, you had to get up and walk over there to get it. In that 2-bedroom house, that same table, the same 9 people around that table, if you wanted something from the cabinet or the cupboards or the sink or the stove, you just reached over and picked it up. And if you needed something from the refrigerator, 2 people got up and moved their chairs so you could open the door. It was difficult for my mother, but more difficult than the space was the fact that in the city, we had city water. In the country, we had water pumped through an open trough into the cistern by the kitchen and pumped up into the house from there so you could flush the toilet, and we were aware of the advantage to that. You could use it in the bathtub. It would come out of the faucets in the sink, but it was from a contaminated shallow well. You could not drink it or use it in cooking. We had to haul water from the big city, and we hauled it in the 5-gallon milk cans. And my mother usually went after the water. She would go to her folks to get it because they were sympathetic. It was a Sunday. I was 15. I was expected to be able to get dinner for 9 on the table. My dad and 2 of my younger brothers were out baling hay. I had the 3 chickens Mom had butchered the day before. I cut them up. I put them in the 2 cast iron skillets, each of which had about ½ an inch of Crisco in it. I had potatoes in the pressure cooker. I had green beans and tomatoes from the gardens. I mixed up biscuits and baked those. I had that pitcher of tea nectar from yesterday. And I was moving right along, and then we were out of water, and Mom took those milk cans and headed for town. I went ahead. I had everything ready, had the chicken fried, I had the potatoes mashed, had the green beans and the tomatoes and the biscuits and the tea nectar, but I didn't know how to make gravy. I knew my dad could tell time by the sun, and he'd be wondering why they hadn't been called in yet for dinner. So I went out and I waved him down, and he pulled up alongside me with that John Deere B, and he kicked the baler out of gear. Now, my brothers were thrilled at that point because it was a terrible old baler. You had to sit on either side of the bale and feed wires through one at a time while the chute was pouring out dirt and dust and chaff, insects alive and dead, parts of field mice, garter snakes, and they would just be stuck all over my brothers because they'd be sweaty, and it was just like glue. Their eyebrows would stick out about an inch by the time the day was over. They were so glad to see me, and my dad, he used that choke in the gears. He got that John Deere B down to where it was just barely humming, and it would just pop about every minute to let you know it was still running. And he said, "What do you need?" And I said, "Daddy, I have the chickens fried, I have the potatoes smashed, I have the green beans and the sliced tomatoes. Daddy, I baked biscuits. I got the iced tea, but Daddy, we were out of water and Mom went to get some and she isn't back yet, and I don't know how to make gravy." He slowed that tractor down just a little bit more and leaned down and taught me how to make gravy right then and there. He said, "I don't care whether you know how to make gravy or not. We're going to finish this pass on the field and come in for dinner. You will have gravy on the table." I said, "Okay." On the walk back to the house, I thought, well, it has something to do with the grease you fix the meat in, and I got 2 cast iron skillets full of grease. And flour. I think it has flour in it. I know where the flour is. I went back to the house and I made gravy. Mom came back with the water. Dad and my brothers came in and cleaned up. 9 people sat down for dinner. 9 people ate my gravy on their mashed potatoes. 9 people cleaned their plates. Not one of them complained. But it was about 3 years before my brother Tom took me aside and he said, "You know, this is how long it has taken for you to make gravy that we could eat without using a knife and a fork." Now, I raised my boys, a single working mom, from the time they were 6 and 10 on up, and I taught them survival skills. I would come home from work and I would not even sit down until I had a good supper on the table, meat, potatoes, and gravy. And they would say things like, "Do I have to eat that?" Or, "We had chicken lumps at school. I was hoping supper would be better." Or, "Couldn't I just have a peanut butter sandwich?" And finally, I'd had it. And I said to that 12-year-old, that's it. That's all. From now on, Tuesday nights, you get supper on the table. And I said to that 8-year-old, and Thursday nights are yours. You tell me what you need. I'll have it in the house, but that's it. Tuesday night, Thursday night. We had spaghetti every Tuesday night for about the next 12 years. But it was really good spaghetti. But that 8-year-old could read a recipe and he liked to cook. We had baked macaroni and cheese. We had yeast rolls. We had baked ham. He liked to cook. And after that, if anyone said, what's for supper, no matter what you answered, they said, oh, that'll be good. Now, when those boys went away to college, I was a little worried about them. They did that obligatory first year in the dorm, and then they got apartments with their buddies. And I was just kind of thinking, okay, if you fixed supper, you didn't have to clean up. So I was a little worried about the kitchen. I visited those apartments and they explained the kitchen to me this way. When you move in, everything's clean and fresh and in the cupboards, and you take what you need and you use it, and then you fill it with water and put it in the sink. And eventually everything's full of water sitting in the sink, but you'll be hungry. So you'll take what you need and wash it up a bit and use it, and then fill it with water and put it back in the sink. And that worked for everything except the frying pan. With the frying pan, you used it, filled it with water, put it in the sink. Next person dumped out the water, used it, filled it with water, put it in the sink. And on Friday night, you brought that to a full rolling boil and stirred it real good, and you had gravy. Now, my dad taught me a lot more than how to make gravy. He taught me I didn't have to stand around and wait for someone to tell me everything. I could figure things out. My mother said it a different way. She said, you never know what you can do until you have to. And I said to my sons, you know, you don't even have to get out of bed to die. As long as you're up, do something. My sons and I have been figuring things out and getting things done ever since.
Oh, I love that story. It's wonderful. How about all of us? We'd all love to be in a house of nine children. Wow, that's beautiful. I grew up under, I cook it, you eat it. So at least you gave them a choice and it taught them a lifelong lesson. I love that story, Patricia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. A real home, down home story, just what we need this afternoon. Oh, wow. Thanks, Patricia. That's Patricia Coffee, everyone. Give her some love. Give her some love. Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, beautiful story. Well, next we have Katie Knutson. Knutson. Knutson.
Knutson.
Knutson. Knutson. Thank you. Katie Knutson. Katie is a professional storyteller and teaching artist based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She has performed and taught around the USA and in Canada, Chile, Italy, and the United Arab Emirates. Did I say that right?
Emirates, yeah.
Emirates.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Katie's writings have been featured in Storytelling Magazine, which I used to love getting in the mail back in the day. Tomorrow's Storytellers Today, Science with Storytelling, and Storytelling Strategies for Reaching and Teaching Children with Special Needs. Katie also served on the board of Story Arts of Minnesota, Northlands, and the National Storytelling Network, and NSN Special Interest Group, Youth Educators and Storytellers, known as YES. Katie is honored to bring all that experience to work for NEST as our new executive director. Hey, Katie is the most creative and innovative storyteller I know in Storyland.
Wow.
And we're welcoming her to hear her new story. You're going to find her at ripplingstories.com. And everything I'm telling you, my friends, is in the chat, okay? So save the chat and you'll keep all the information convenient. So let's give a big virtual hug and embrace to Katie Knutson's story, The Magic Pine Cone. Come on, Katie, give her a hug. I love your blouse. It's so pretty. Yes.
I get all those hugs. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
great
It is a
hug.
pleasure to be here. And thank you, Oni, for that wonderful introduction. So this is it's not so much of a new story. This is actually a very old story from Norway, and it's my pleasure to share it with you today. In a small town where everyone knew everyone else, a stranger came walking. He had a beat-up old hat, a tattered jacket, and his toes were sticking out through holes in the tips of his shoes. As he walked through town, he smiled and waved and tipped his hat at everybody. But they thought he was a beggar. They looked away. They averted their eyes. They got very interested in whatever the ground looked like in front of them or their shoes until the man passed. Finally, he did. And he walked straight through town, unfazed by all of this, up to the biggest, grandest house. It was a big red brick house with big white pillars and beautiful pink rose bushes in the front. When he got there, he knocked on the giant oak door. And the mayor's wife answered. "Hello." "Oh, what do you want?" Good day, ma'am. I'm traveling through town. I need a place to stay for just one night." "We don't take beggars here." And she slammed the door in his face. Well, again, the man seemed unfazed by this. He turned and walked right back through town, past all of those people looking away, to the smallest house. Now, this one was not only different in size, but also in sounds. Because the mayor's house, it had been very quiet from a distance, but this house, you could hear the laughter and the squealing of children from far away. He walked up to this house. One of the windows was broken. There was a patch on the roof. He knocked a little more gently on this door. And a small face appeared. "Hello? Oh, Mom, there's a man here." And soon, a woman with long brown hair and kind brown eyes came to the door. "Hi, may I help you?" Yes, I'm traveling through town. I need a place to stay for just one night." "Well, come in. I don't have much, but what I have is yours. Come in." And so the man came in, as was customary to do in the time to welcome a traveler into your home. The children were so excited to have somebody new in the house. They continued the work they'd been doing. One child was stirring a pot of beans on the stove, another was cutting bread, one was setting the silverware on the table, another one the plates, and they set another plate. Soon they all gathered and sat down for dinner. Each person got a single scoop of beans and one slice of bread. They ate, their stomachs still growling, but there was no more food to give. But what they didn't have in food, they made up for in stories. The man told the children about the different places that he had traveled, about the food that he had eaten and the people that he had met. And the children told him about the adventures they had had in the neighborhood, about the treasures they would find, sticks and stones, pine cones and special-shaped rocks. They told him about all the interesting characters of the town. And after the sun was set, they decided it was time for bed. The woman looked to the man and said, "You may sleep in my room. It is just there. I will sleep out here with the children." And the man watched as that room, which had been just a kitchen with a living room next to it, well, that living room transformed. They pushed the kitchen table out of the way. They opened up boxes and bins, rolled out mats, pulled out blankets and cushions and pillows until it was a giant sleeping area. The man went into the bedroom. It was a small room, big enough for just one straw mattress. And he lay down on that mattress, feeling the straw poking him in different places, but eventually he found a place that was comfortable and slept well. The next morning, when he woke up, the house had already been transformed. The children had packed up all those blankets and pillows and cushions, and that young woman, the mother, she had put a towel on the kitchen table. She had her iron warming on the stove, and there was a single piece of cloth next to her sewing kit. She was a seamstress, and she had to make one more piece of clothing, something simple that she could make and sell in a day so that she could feed her children that night. She saw the man and said, "Welcome. How did you sleep?" "Well, thank you. Would you like breakfast? We're making some oatmeal." "No, I must be on my way." And he reached out, he got his jacket, he put on that hat, and he thanked the woman. And then he said, "I would like to give you a gift, to show you my appreciation for your kindness and generosity." He reached into his pocket. The woman, she had heard of strange travelers traveling through town, bringing wonderful gifts, and she wondered what this could be. A piece of gold, perhaps? Maybe some food? And then he pulled out of his pocket a pine cone. The woman had been given many pine cones in her life, but never by an adult. She thanked him, and he saw the look on her face. "You don't understand. You see, this is a magic pine cone, and the first thing you do today will be multiplied by 1,000. She took it, thanked him again, and the man let himself out. The woman didn't believe much in magic. She set that pine cone down and went to get her actual work done. She went to pick up that piece of cloth. She shook it out and brought it over to where she'd be sitting to sew. But she went back to get her shears. And when she did, there was a second piece of cloth. This first one had just been a simple white cotton, but this was blue. Velvet. She had never felt something so wonderful. She picked it up, shook it out, and laid it down with the cotton. And then when she went back, there was another piece, this one yellow and silk. This happened over and over again, 1,000 times, until her house was filled with 1,000 pieces of cloth. The children wrapped their bodies in them and paraded around the house. And that woman had enough cloth to make clothing so that every person in town eventually had one of her original pieces, and her children never had to go to bed with their stomachs grumbling again. Now, in this small town, it didn't take long for word of this woman's good fortune to spread. Exactly 1 year later, that same man, with that beat-up old hat, the tattered jacket, and his toes sticking out through holes in the tips of his shoes, came walking through town again. And this time, everyone knew who he was. They smiled and they waved. "Hi, hello, do you need a place to stay? We have a wonderful house. You should come and visit. You look tired. Are you hungry?" But again, the man seemed unfazed by all of this attention. He smiled and waved and tipped his hat and made his way up to that large house again, that big brick house with the white pillars and the pink rose bushes. And again, he knocked on that great oak door. And the mayor's wife answered again. "Hello." "Oh, I remember you. Do you need a place to stay?" "Yes, ma'am. As a matter of fact, I do." "Well, come in, come in. You know, the cooks were making dinner." One of the cooks popped his head out of the kitchen. "You can put that away. The veal will do." "Yes, that old ground stuff. Yes, that's great. Okay. And and we'll find a guest room for you too." One of the maids was walking by. Just put on the old sheets. That'll be enough." And then she invited the man in. "Can I take your jacket? Maybe you could just hang it yourself so I don't have to touch it." "Welcome, welcome, come in." And so they sat down and they ate. It was a perfectly fine meal, and the man did have enough to eat. The woman just stared at him. Ah, well, good. I'm glad you've had some food now. All right, off to bed. And he went up to the room. It was a nice guest room. I'm sure every room in that house was a nice guest room. But he did notice that the sheets had stains on them. He pulled them up and laid down in them. He was comfortable and fell asleep. In the morning, when he got up, why, the mayor's wife was already hard at work. You see, she had taken out all of the gold from all of the different places they had hidden it throughout the house, and she was ready to count that gold as soon as she got that pine cone, so that she would see it multiplied. The man came downstairs, and she was waiting for him. Oh, good. Did you sleep well? Great. I'm glad. He realized there was no point in answering. So, do you have anything for me? You know, a little gift, maybe a pine cone, something like that. Yes, I would like to thank you for your generosity and kindness. He put on his hat and his old jacket and reached into the pocket where he pulled out a pine cone. And before he could even tell her that the first thing she would do that day would be multiplied by 1,000, she pulled it out of his hands and said, "You can show yourself out," and began to walk towards that pile of gold. But as she walked, something happened she didn't expect. You see, there was a little breeze. The man opened that door to let himself out, and that breeze came in through the door, through the open windows, and with it carried just a little bit of pollen from one of those pink roses, carried it up into the air, and when she breathed in, thinking about that gold, that pollen wedged itself inside her nose, and she achoo! Sneezed. Achoo! Achoo! She didn't sneeze once or twice or even the customary 3 times. No, she sneezed 1,000 times. By the time she was done sneezing, her eyes were puffy and watery. She could barely see through 2 little slits. Her nose was red and raw. Her throat was hoarse, and she was surrounded by a pile of handkerchiefs. It didn't take long in this small town for word of this woman's misfortune to spread either. In fact, eventually word even got back to that man with the beat-up old hat, the tattered jacket, and his toes sticking out through holes in the tips of his shoes. When he heard the story, he smiled, patted his pocket full of pine cones, and continued on his way to the next town.
Wow, that's what she gets. Zyrtex for life. I love that story. And Denise Page says she loved your characterization and your voices, and we all love that. Beautiful telling, exquisite timing. All the comments are coming in for you, Katie. Oh, it's a lovely story. Yeah, so that's the origin of allergies, I'd say. That could be a wise story, right? Oh, I've enjoyed these stories so much, more than I thought I would, because, sometimes, well, being an MC, it makes you pay attention. So I just love Mike's story about his little twist on Aesop, the grasshopper and the ant from the ant's perspective. And Patricia Coffee made me feel like I wanted to move to Iowa and grow up and teach her how to make some gravy. But she taught her sons. And who doesn't love a man that can cook? So Patricia, you did a great service to the women who married your son. And we're going to hear from Laura Sims. But first, our tech, I want you all to know that our wonderful tech is Jim Brule. And if you don't know Jim Brule, then I don't know where you've been in Storyland. Because Jim Brule, he's going to give us a little commercial.
Yeah, just a short commercial break here. As you know, this was an event that we put on without charge to anyone, but that doesn't mean we want to deprive you of the joy of giving. So we are happy to accept your donations at our website. Let me throw the link into the chat here. There we go. And, we all get stronger together. So please do consider giving a donation to Nest. And I will step out of the way of the next storyteller. So there we go.
Thank you, Jim. If you don't know how to do it now, you can always go to Nest later on and give a donation later on today, tomorrow. But we appreciate whatever you can afford to share and support these programs. Next up, we have someone whose book I have in my library. Yes, Laura Sims. And when I thought about Nest, it came to mind that Nest is sort of like a home, like we nest, it has double meaning. And I thought of Laura, and I know she spreads her storytelling wings from the state of New York to Nest, the Northeast Storytellers. And we're so happy to have you as a new member, Laura. Laura is an internationally acclaimed storyteller, educator, and writer. She combines traditional stories with personal narratives, and that's not easy to do. Her performances are riveting. Her teaching, coaching is legendary for depth and individualized approach. Laura is a contributing editor for Parabola Magazine and the artistic director of the Hans Christian Andersen Storytelling Center in New York. Oh, we all want to go there, right? She's a storytelling consultant for the Fetzer Institute Sacred Story Project. And Laura won the Oracle Award, Talking Leaves, and Lifetime Achievement Award from NSN, National Storytelling Network, okay? Laura is a senior research fellow at Rutgers University's Peace Center under the auspices of UNESCO. Laura has won the Sesame Street Sunny Days Award. Laura, you're going to have to tell us how to get to Sesame Street, okay? For her work with children worldwide. She has written 5 books and has saved a zoo in Romania. Laura gives new meaning to super storyteller. That's right. Laura's most recent books are Our Secret Territory and The Robe of Love. Oh, I'd love to wear that robe. Laura's newest book, Wild Rose, will be published. It's summoning the restoration of the world. Wild Rose is summoning the restoration of the world. Wow, that's deep. It's going to be published in 2023. Look for it at laurasims.com. Laura Sims has soared in the storyland, and we are so pleased that she landed in our nest as a new member. Laura, we'd love to hear your story. So you can tell us the story of a feather and a dove egg. Please welcome Laura Sims.
Oni, you are such a luscious MC, my goodness.
You guys make it easy. I'm so excited to be introducing you all.
No, your ancestors must be really pleased. You're a great orator, and your
I'm trying.
warmth is just
I can read a little too.
That's great. Well, it's really a pleasure to be in this nest. I'm excited. There's something very special about Nest. I was trying to think if there were words for it, but maybe the beautiful stories we've all heard and this warmth is what is so special about it. Anyway, this is a story that I only told once, and then this summer I was in New Zealand twice for months with my brother who was dying, and this story came back to me. So thank you for giving me this chance. So I live on Broadway in Manhattan, and from my back kitchen window, I look out on a tarmac, which is a low roof. And for the past 10 years, until about 2 weeks ago, when my neighbors went berserk, I've been feeding an increasingly large flock of birds. One afternoon, I looked out, and actually on the tarmac, there was a body of a pigeon. And I knew this bird, I recognized it, because he or she often was on my windowsill. And this couple would be beak to beak, and their long necks would make the shape of a heart. And I looked for the mate, pigeons mate for life. And all of a sudden, he or she appeared, alighted on the body, and began kind of dancing, kneading the breast of the bird. I didn't know if it was mourning, celebrating, praying, or trying to revive its partner. It reminded me of like just elephant funerals and the sight of my brother when I sat with him as he was dying and held his hand. Now, the amazing thing was that the bird hopped off the body and then began circumambulating round and round, and a lot of birds began appearing. The starlings were kind of darting in and out. The sparrows were lined up on ledges. All the pigeons were up on the top roof, and the mourning doves were on one of my windowsills, their red rimmed eyes, very attentive, and their little tail making a kind of whistling sound as they moved. Now, when I was a little girl growing up in Brooklyn, I used to create invented funerals in my backyard. I would bury things like my mother's single earrings that she tossed out. People might bring a kind of canary that had died, and my brother would give me the bodies of fish that had passed out and died in his aquarium, and eventually I buried my childhood dog there. So I opened the window and none of the birds left, and I returned to my childhood where I could turn things into other things, and I made this kind of loud incantation for the bird that had died and celebrated the pigeon that went round and round, and I thought my neighbors might stick their heads out of windows and go absolutely crazy, but there was no human response. None of the birds left, and I closed the window and waited until the sun started going down, and all the birds one by one just flew away. Now, I watched the body of the dead bird. It changed colors over the days, and then it just sort of looked like a flattened fan of desiccated feathers. But there was a wind that blew it away, and what was left were bones. And then there was a storm, and that disappeared. And what was left on the tarmac was a single white feather with a black tip. Wind blew, and that was gone. It made me think and remember an astonishing San, we call it Bushman, story. There was once a hunter, and he brought an ostrich home to his wife so she could clean it and cook it. And she took it out of the net, and what was left in the net was a feather and a single drop of blood. So she tapped the net on a stone, and the feather with the blood landed on a tall blade of grass alongside the water. A wind blew the feather onto the river, and it stayed there for a long time. And the story tells intricate details of what happened to the feather. What is most extraordinary is that feather became an ostrich. The water, the wind brought the ostrich back to life. Its spine, its strong legs, its head, its heart beating, all the feathers, and then its eyes opened, walked out of the river, and went back to the nest where its mate was sitting on 3 eggs. The very next day, underneath the air conditioner that's in the next window from the one where I fed the birds, under the air conditioner was a round, translucent dove's egg. No doves. It was so beautiful, and the sun shone on it. Astonishing. But by the next day, that was gone. I continued to feed birds. And one night, I had an extraordinary dream. There was a glass aquarium. Maybe it was a glass coffin, like the story, the Grimm story I tell. And in it was packed with pigeons and doves. And underneath all the birds was a burned pigeon lying there black, barely moving. A man appeared beside me in the dream, and he said, "Look." He took his finger, put it into the glass case, touched the burned bird. Its skinless, featherless, thin face looked up. The bird opened its eyes and stared right at me. And I said, "What should I do? How should I care for this bird?" And I woke up. It was around that time that I was taking care of a ginkgo tree across the street. It had flowered and was beautiful, but a construction company tore down the building, put a yellow plastic fence around the tree, and passerbys mistook it for a trash bin. So there were barely any leaves, and somebody came and cut down, just severed top branches and branches on the side. One of the construction workers and I, he was Jamaican, his father had a tree farm. We climbed in and cleaned it out and began to water the ginkgo tree. And little by little, some leaves began to appear on branches. Then the construction site was gone. And I thought, now the ginkgo tree will flower. And I looked, and there one morning, from the very bottom, which was a sign of new growth, was a little teeny thin branch, and on the end were beautiful green leaf buds. I said, "It's alive! It's alive!" But then I went one day, and it was completely gone. It had been cut down, sliced right to the bottom of the trunk. My brother, hours before he died, was in the other world. His eyes were closed. Then suddenly his eyes opened. And he looked out, not at me, but whatever it was he saw, and his hands moved so gracefully. He was conducting a symphony orchestra smiling. I said, "What are you doing?" And then he opened his eyes. He looked. I don't know whether he saw me or not, but he said, "I am saying good night to everyone." Now, I said to myself when I sat with him, what should I do? And I thought, how can I care for this world? And then I thought, alive, I'll tell this story. And that's that. Mm.
Thank you, Laura. That was a beautiful story.
Thank you.
Always love birth stories and the connection that we have with them and with our family. Thank you so much for that beautiful story. We have a lot of people who are making comments and appreciating your telling of it. Wow, it's beautiful. Well, we're close to the ending time, but don't go anywhere because we have so much more ahead. Okay, so we're going to hear from Angela Lloyd, and I'm going to bring her on right now because we don't want to take up any more of your time, but there's some other things coming up, right? Angela, oh, there you are, pretty in pink, girl.
Hello.
Angela Lloyd is nested in California. And in the words of Barbara McBride Smith, Angela is diagonally parked in a parallel world. Angela Solo's performances are a whimsical braid of poetry, story, and songs. She plays a harp, a auto harp, tenor guitar, spoon, and bell. And she was nominated in 2013 by her peers for the Circle of Excellence Oracle Award at the National Storytelling Network. Yay, Angela! Angela currently serves on the Yes Board for Youth Educators and Storytellers and the Oracle Award Committee. Angela recently traded the long commute for a time to be with her husband at home in the California high desert. She's traded the drive for Prismacolor pencils, vellum paper. She's going to tell us what all that is in a minute, right? Crochet hooks and scintillating yarn. Let's welcome Angela Lloyd and listen to her poetically titled story, Haiku.
Thank you, Oni. Thank you, everyone. It's good to be with you all today. I'm going to start with an old tune. This is a ukulele. And this song, I often think of this song as a metaphor for moving from theater to storytelling. I thought it was a good one today because it's about open land. It goes like this. Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me be right through the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me off forever, but I ask you please, don't fence me in, just turn me loose. Let me straddle my old saddle underneath the western skies. On my cayuse, let me wander over yonder till I see the mountains rise. I want to ride to the ridge where the west commences. Gaze at the moon until I lose my senses. Can't look at hobbles and I can't stand fences. Don't fence me in. Don't fence me in. So, back in the late 90s, I was doing a certain amount of driving on the highways of California and some flying. And the National Storytelling Conference took place in San Diego. And one of the features of the national conference was that we were going to have a contra dance. Donald Davis would be gathering with some other musicians, and he was going to be calling the contra dance, not unlike a square dance, but the dances are done in long lines. And I was so looking forward to the contra dance. And so my first partner was a flamenco dancer from Colorado. And there's a place near the end of the contra dance where you can stand and clap, or you could swing your partner. And I turned to my partner and I said, let's go around really fast. And he thought I meant once. And we went around once and he let me go. And I broke my fall with my right wrist, and I broke my wrist. So several weeks later, it was time to travel to a assisted living facility down south, an hour something from my house. And the surgeon had told me I was not allowed to drive. So that got me getting my things ready to get on a Greyhound bus. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd been driving solo in my car, everything the way I liked it, anonymously for years. And now I was getting on public transportation. On the morning of getting on the bus ride, my neighbor, who normally says no to any request, anything at all, she had agreed to drive me over the hill to the bus stop. It was just 2 blocks from my house. And I had left for the day with a cup of coffee, another cup with cereal in it, a tall cup and a spoon, and a small suitcase. What was in the suitcase? A tambourine. I had written to the assisted facility saying, I won't be playing my washboard because my right wrist is in a cast, but I'm bringing my tambourine. So I got down to the bus station, and the first thing I noticed was outside this station, there were no benches. And I thought, that is so strange for a bus station to have no place to sit, where people come to get ready to get on a bus, where others come to pick up friends that are coming on a bus, no benches. So when I went inside to buy my ticket, I looked for some chairs and I found one. And with my good arm, I brought it outside and I sat up outside to have my cup of coffee and my cereal alternatively and enjoy the morning. Well, I wasn't out there very long when out from the package office at the Greyhound bus station came a fellow in a uniform, shaking his finger saying, you can't have that chair out here. And I said, where are the benches? I said, you have lovely shade all around here. Where are the benches? And he said, we had a bench. And I said, what happened to it? And he said, it got busted up. Bring that chair back in. And I said, yes, sir. And so I took the chair back in. And when I came back outside, I was leaning against the wall, having my hot cup of coffee. Here comes the train, just to let you know. It's nearby. It's going to blow. I was leaning against the wall when out from the package express door came the uniformed worker again, and he was waving a small piece of paper at me. And he said, look. And I said, what is that? And he said, it's a photo of the bench. He handed it to me, and there it was. There's the bench. And I said, what happened to it? And he said, someone came with a sledgehammer and they busted up the wood and they broke the concrete legs. Now, if we had been in the middle of a lunar eclipse, I would have been able to look at it through the thumbtack pinhole on the photograph. I looked at it, I looked through the sky, and then I gave it back to him. And I said, when did this happen? He said, 7 years ago. I made sure he had the photo back in his hands because I know that it had to go back up on his bulletin board. Well, the Greyhound bus pulled in and I got on. It was pretty full. And as soon as I got settled in my suitcase, I pulled out my favorite copy of Steve Sandfield's American Zen from a guy who tried it. Now, in those days, whenever I traveled, I always took this book with me because as soon as I got settled on my seat on the plane or bus, I would take out the haiku and I would read them and they would calm me down. I don't know about you, but leaving home is very challenging. And those 36 hours before you leave home, that's where the work is. Ed Stivender says that's why they pay us money to come and tell stories. It's not for the stories. It's so we'll leave home. So I got out and these are my favorites. I thought I'd share a few with you. Here's one. Emptying the piss pot, he notices the moon, pours it on himself. I love this one. It has a long title. The title's longer than the piece. A poem for those of you who are sometimes troubled by barking dogs and low-flying jets. Reaching for the silence, he hears every single sound. And my favorite, remarkable, failed my teacher, my lover, myself, all in a single day. I was on the bus. I read my haiku. I was settling down. And as we started on our trip down south, I thought I should write a haiku for the bench. Now I was writing with my left hand, and that had been very fun, very entertaining. If ever you run out of things to do, just enjoy writing with your non-dominant hand. So I'm writing on a pad of paper and I'm working on the haiku, and it took me a little bit. And I do want to say that Steve Sandfield said that when you're writing haiku in English, you don't have to follow 757. That's if you're writing in Japanese. 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5. No. In English, he said, best to use as few words as possible. Here's the haiku. Busted bench. 7 years since, we still stand for it. So our journey had begun. And after being on for a little bit, I decided I would go and use the restroom. So I moseyed back down that very skinny aisle. And when I got inside the restroom, I noticed it had that tiny triangle stainless steel sink that is we see every now and then. And we used to see when my family and I sailed on a sailboat that my father had for a number of years. I used the restroom and then I went to get a moist towelette. These are the hand wipes you have. And I noticed that our bus was out of them. And there on the stainless steel little triangle were these open packages with silver on the inside, but no moist towelettes. Now, I told you I'd left with a small suitcase, so I had moist towelettes in my suitcase because I have what I need when I go traveling, whether I'm on a bus or in my car. But I was very concerned for the bus. So I got back to my seat, I washed my hands, and then it happened that the driver announced we were now going to San Bernardino, which was 30 miles out of my way, to have a little bus break. So suddenly he goes off on a whole other highway, and we arrive in San Bernardino for a bus break. Everybody gets off, and I got off, and I found a uniformed Greyhound bus worker. And I said to him, excuse me, I said, we are out of moist towelettes on our bus. And he looked at me and he said, "What?" I said, "We don't have any moist towelettes on our bus." And he said, "No, no, no. They only have those in LA." I said, "What?" And he threw up his hands. Here's my dog, Maddie. Come on down, honey. He threw up his hands and he went inside the building. And I got back on my bus. But after a few moments, he came back out and he was motioning to me to get off the bus. Now, the bus is high and he's on the ground. So he's looking up and he had me get off the bus. And when I got off, he said, "How many do you need?" I said, 10. He said, 10? I said, "Yes, 1 for me and 9 for the bus." And he went, "Wah!" And he marched off, and another bus had just pulled in for a break. And I watched him get on the bus. I watched his figure go to the back, to the restroom. He came off the bus, and he came back to me, and he had handfuls of the moist towelettes. And he started to dole them out like playing cards. And I when he was done, he'd given me like 4 of them. And I said, "What are you going to do with those?" And he goes, "These are for me." And I said, "You?" I said, "You are wearing a uniform. You work here." And he gave me the rest of them. And I took them in my fists. I got back on the bus and I held them up to show the passengers. I said, "Look." And nobody was looking. Nobody cared about moist towelettes. And as I made my way back to the restroom, I noticed that a fellow was moving his things across the aisle. And he had like 5 moist towelettes that were not open. And I thought, aha, that's what's happened. Everybody's just filled their pockets with them. I went to the back. I smoothed them all out. I loaded them into the stainless steel dispenser. And then I came back to my seat. And the bus backed up and proceeded to get back on its route to take me to Covina, where I would be picked up by a friend and go and play stories in a tambourine for an assisted living. So while we're riding, I'm thinking, boy, if ever I'm incarcerated, I'm going to be fine. Or institutionalized. I'll be fine. And I thought I should write a haiku. I mean, I've been anonymous in my car with the music the way I like it, my tea towel for a lap mat, my music, my moist towelettes. I have everything I like. But now I'm on public transportation and I have become a political activist. So with my left hand, I was writing and I wrote it. It goes like this. Leftists, where do we come from? Broken rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That is so wonderful, Angela. Adventures of a dog bus ride, right? It can only happen on the dog bus. Oh, everybody give Angela some love. Give her some hearts. Give her some love. Oh, we're going to give some love again to Laura Sims.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a wonderful story. I love your story. It made me laugh. And laughter is the best medicine. That's for sure. So everybody, this is the end of our program for this afternoon, but much more is coming up. We want to thank Laura Sims. If I hit Broadway, I'm going to stand in the middle of Broadway and say, "Laura Sims, where are you?"
Hey,
And they
Ernie!
won't even pay me any mind on Broadway because I've seen those characters there, right? And then also Katie Knudsen, thank you for your story. It was beautiful, sis. I just loved it. Everyone loved that one too. And Patricia Coffee, keep on making that gravy, girlfriend.
Mhm.
And Mike, he had to leave, but Mike Perry, we loved his twist on the Nancy Dale. And I'm only Lasana and you're not. And remember that. And I want to thank you because you could have been anywhere else in the world today, but you chose to spend this afternoon with us nesting in stories and at our new membership showcase. And if you aren't a member, join, okay? And that we sincerely thank you. And you can hear stories I like to tell on my podcast, Auntie with an I, Oni Story Village. And I'll see you later this afternoon. We're going to be meeting up again. We're going to take our break. Happy hour with games at 6:30. Be there or be square. Okay? In the square, be there. And then after that, we're going to have the storyboard Nest board members in concert. And I can't wait to see my Ubuntu sister, Denise Page. So I'm going to ask one of the board members to say bye, or do I just say bye? See you later, sweet potato. After a while, honey child.
We'll see you back.
All right, see you back at 6:30, everybody. I can't wait to play some games. Yay!